That was the most beautiful, amazing gift ever. Thank you so much, Valerie. I am so happy to be here tonight. I can't tell you how happy I am that I'm here. And I got here just in time for dinner because I forgot about the time change, so I thought it was an hour early. So thank you so much for inviting me back. I'm so happy to be here. So I'm going to read some nonfiction pieces tonight, some shorter pieces and some abridged, longer pieces. And I like to dedicate this to all of my professors at Notre Dame who made me what I am today. So thank you so much. I remain very sorry for what I did to the little black kitten. I remain very sorry for what I did to the little black kitten. The woman who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac had a litter of cats, and she was looking for people to take them. She said they would be dead in 5 days because she was going to take the unclaimed ones to the animal shelter where they would just kill them. And although I did not have my father's permission, after school one day I saw the woman on her porch and told her that my father said I could have one. So I picked up a little black kitten and took her home to my room with the green and yellow speckled carpeting and placed her on a bed of newspapers. I cannot say that my treatment of her had to do with not yet knowing about tenderness and love and care. Because there had been family dogs that had passed that I felt very sad for. We already had a family cat, and I had loved that cat and let it knead my tummy after school when I was younger. That cat, however, ventured outdoors, so we did not have a litter box. I was not prepared then for the little black cat's poop, tarry and pungent and loose, or her pee that ran off the newspaper in rivulets into the carpet. My father heard her crying, and that is how he knew. He did not think we should keep it. I went across the street to my older sister's friend's house to ask her if it was true that Nancy of Sid and Nancy had a cat that she had named Fuck You in French. She said yes, and she told me that fuck you in French was foutoir. So I named my black kitten Foutoir. I posed for a photo with Foutoir. I was all dressed in black. I feel extremely sorry that I used the little black cat for an accessory to my burgeoning wannabe preteen identity. My father, who was prepared to keep the cat, did not know that I lied when I said that a friend was going to take her in. I do not know why I said that. My mother was away, a new circumstance that we did not talk about. And I think I recognized that my father, who gave us a $20 bill each week for lunch and bus fare and sundries, and who bought us maxi pads and pimple soap, did not really want to keep the cat. So I wanted to free him of that burden of another thing to care for. My mother did something similar. She drove around our neighborhood and threw one of our house cats out the car window. I was supposed to have been too young to have remembered, but I remembered. And so my older sister and a friend and I went on that exact street, the scene of a previous abandonment, and I opened the door and pushed out the little cat. We drove off, but we could still hear her crying. She had jumped into the underside of the car, an act that signaled her very helplessness, her desire to stay with us. She clung to us in the only way that her little baby self knew. And because I wanted to exude a tough girl personality, I myself got out of the car and pried her off. I remain very sorry for what I did to that cat, and although I entertained thoughts that someone found her and treated her nicely until she got old, I know no one did. She had been a mere handful of preciousness. That much merely, and I had not allowed her to become more. She remains merely as green eyes, little animal feet, tiny pink toe pads, needle-thin claws, the rosebud tongue, the wet pearl nose, thin, iridescent ear flesh, the lightness of herself when she balanced her feet on my skin. Last night, the catch of grief came hard and quick. It stung my bones. My 3-year-old daughter walked up to me. We had not been talking about cats, and said that little cats like milk. They like to lick it from their little milk bowls. And this is a piece called Morning Suit. My husband bought his morning suit on a Wednesday. It was foggy, it was February. He would have to fly back to New York the next day. My husband has always liked suits. He has always loved an occasion to wear a suit. There were nights when he would say, let's get dressed and go out, and we would get dressed and go out, and he would put on a suit. He always looked so nice in a suit, and he loved to wear a suit. A graduate student and adjunct instructor, he did not very often get to wear a suit. When he put on his suit, we would spend money as if he had a job that demanded that he wear a suit. And so our nights in his suit would be quite costly, but it was okay because we were young and in love, and in Brooklyn where it was okay to be young and in love and in Brooklyn and spend too much money. Springtime in Brooklyn, and it's a flourish of petals of pink. The cherry trees on First Street are all in bloom, and my husband, who is not yet my husband, is in love with me. And we are celebrating the spring with a bottle of champagne, and our neighbors ask, what's the occasion and why celebrate? And we just say, it's spring, and we have a stoop. My husband bought his morning suit on a Wednesday. It was winter, it was Chicago, and we did not have a stoop. We did not have a stoop, we had a deck, and our deck was covered with a 2-foot snowdrift from the blizzard. The blizzard was the 3rd worst blizzard in Chicago history. Springtime in Brooklyn, and it's a honeydew green in the trees and a burst of chartreuse. We have a stoop and it's spring, and later my husband, who is not yet my husband, will say, let's get dressed and go out. We did not have a stoop, we had a deck, and there are no stoops, and no cherry trees, and no chartreuse, and no champagne, and no just because. There are snows and snows and snows and a blizzard, and our little daughter's hands are cold, so cold. My husband bought his morning suit on a Wednesday. He would have to fly back to New York the next day. The man who loved to get dressed up and spend money just because had a daughter named Penny, who was only 5 weeks old. My husband bought his morning suit on Wednesday, February 16, because he thought it was only right to go back to his job as an adjunct instructor, despite the fact that his father had died. And that is why he was buying a morning suit. He was buying a morning suit because his father had died and he did not have an appropriate suit. He had suits, but he wanted a new suit that would befit the occasion of delivering his father's eulogy. My husband, on a cold day in Chicago, bought an $800 suit for less than $100. Fog was forming. Fog was forming due to warm, moist air creeping and covering the snow. Fog was creeping toward the city. That is the verb the weather alert used. The fog would creep into the city. It would cause impacts. It would reduce visibility. It would make for dangerous driving. It would make for perilous conditions. My husband bought his morning suit on the night the fog was forming. My husband planned his father's eulogy as the fog crept into the city and caused impacts of reduced visibility. It was a gray, dreary Wednesday night, according to one weather report. My husband bought his morning suit on that gray, dreary Wednesday night when there was a dense fog advisory. My father-in-law had a job that demanded that he wear a suit. My father-in-law, in his suit, worked with money. My father-in-law, who was a banker, worked with money and wore a suit. When he died, his son did not have a mourning suit and would need to buy one. My husband bought his mourning suit with a combination of gift cards that his father could not and did not use in his lifetime, and a coupon that his father had and in-store sales. The banker, whose job demanded that he wear a suit, had made it possible after his passing for his son to buy a mourning suit. On his way to O'Hare, my husband had the taxi driver make a stop so that he could pick up his mourning suit. The alterations had been hastened because of the occasion of his needing the mourning suit. My husband flew back to Penny and me with his mourning suit. Penny is 5 weeks old and is going through a growth spurt and needs to feed and feed and feed. She hardly sleeps. She hardly sleeps. Besides my father-in-law's caretaker, who had not yet been let go, there isn't anyone home. Everyone is getting busy getting their morning clothes, their hair done, their faces composed. I have a daughter who needs to feed and feed and feed. I could not leave. I packed my black maternity dress. I packed my black shoes, my black maternity coat. My father-in-law's head has fallen off, and my husband is trying to fix it. He says he can screw it back on. I say, can it wait until morning? He gets angry, says, I don't know what I'm talking about. Penny is finally asleep, and I'm afraid that his fidgeting with the bedside lamp will wake her. He has taken the lampshade off, the light bulb out, and I am afraid that he will wake her. When Hamlet encounters his father's ghost, it is during the night in a fog. I am thy father's spirit, the ghost says. And although he would love for his son to avenge his murder, he wants more than that, to be remembered. Before leaving, his last words, remember me. My husband's father, who also loved to get dressed up and go out and order champagne just because, was not buried in a suit. He was cremated, and his cremains were not placed in an urn, but rather they were placed in an empty box that once held champagne. While my husband was gone into the city of snow, I held my daughter and thought how old and young a newborn's hands and feet are. How they wrinkle, how they flake, how they hardly know how or what to hold. My husband was gone into the city of snow. His father had a pressure that made him cry. His father had a pressure that creeped. It crept into that part that makes a man think. His father often fell asleep. His father fell asleep at a wheel during a drive. His father felt a pressure behind his eye that made him cry. I'm afraid that he will wake her. I am afraid that he will suffer a shock. The doorbell rang at 4 in the morning, and that is how I knew to call to see if he had died. And he had died. And I said, I know. And he asked how I knew. And I said the doorbell rang, and I knew he was coming home. Hamlet's father's ghost, doomed for a certain term to walk the night. My husband's father was walking toward the rising waters. My husband bought his morning suit on a Wednesday. My husband's morning suit was beautiful, pristine. My husband's morning suit, as my father-in-law would say, traveled well. There was not a wrinkle in it when it arrived in the city of rising water. My father-in-law's head has fallen off, and he believes the doctors will fix it. It's a speckled and splotchy type of cancer, stippled, my husband says. The GBM is grade 4. The GBM is the worst kind of brain cancer. My father-in-law's head has fallen off. In the dark, my husband, dismantling the bedside lamp, holds the bulb, believes he can fix it. Don't answer it. Whatever you do, don't answer the door. My nursling is asleep. She hardly sleeps. More than anything, my husband says, more than anything, Dad, I miss the sound of your voice. I can hear you. I miss you so much. More than anything, I can hear you. I miss you so much. And so it goes and goes, my husband talking in his sorrowful sleep. In his morning suit bought in Chicago on a Wednesday, my husband delivers his father's eulogy. He has never said anything more important. He will never again say anything more important. Sweet Penny somehow sleeps despite the bagpipes, filling the cathedral with the screeching kind of mourning. My husband, who loved to wear suits and who loved to spend money in a suit, wore an $800 suit that actually cost $100 when he told everyone how terrible death was and how his father was but a flicker in a sea of deaths. Back in the city of snow, my husband sleeps, and in that foggy sleep, he flails his arms as if he were rowing a boat, as if he were close to flying, as if he were suffering and in need of help and signaling, as if he were drowning and trying to reach the surface of some sea. In the middle of the night, our baby sleeps, and he thinks he can fix it. I am afraid that he will suffer a shock. Back in the city of snow, I take my husband's morning suit to the cleaners. This is not something that we ever do, to take a suit that has been worn immediately to the cleaners. He says that he wants to go back. He doesn't like it here one bit, all this cold and all this snow and all this fog. In the city of snow, he keeps saying that he wants to go back. He wants to go back to the city of blossoms. And I just want to say that my father-in-law went to Notre Dame, and so they played the fight song, and there were people dressed in kilts playing bagpipes during the funeral. It was really lovely. And they did it for real, like they weren't wearing any underwear underneath the kilts. It was a very windy day. Yes. So let me see how much time I have here. So I think I'm going to read a few more pieces, and I'm going to read an abridged version of my essay on sea monkeys. So this is going to be an abridged version because it's a little longer. Okay, I'll just write down the time so I don't go over. Anybody else raise sea monkeys? It will prove some points I made in my essay that I didn't get very many hands. But we all know what they are. They're little tiny brine shrimp that you could hatch at home. The booklet I delighted in reading and rereading when I was younger has now become difficult for me to read. I am sure that I now need reading glasses. It is not a matter of applying eye drops or squinting. It now hurts to read the booklet on sea monkeys. It's fun to raise sea monkeys. Official Sea Monkey Handbook was an outlet of boredom and a source of wonder and longing when I was younger. But now that I am older, my eyes strain to see both the writing in the booklet and, more tragic, the newly hatched eggs of the Artemia nios. Once, the difficulty in reading resided in decoding the very scientific, adult, and literary language of the booklet. Now, however, the difficulty resides in the fact that I am an adult and literary, hyper-literary, and can no longer read the small script. I suppose that I will someday, perhaps even during this one summer, bring myself to make an appointment to see an optometrist so that I can get the reading glasses that I am sure I need, but cannot come to terms with needing. To know that I need reading glasses and to purchase them and to wear them means to accept the fact that I have grown older and have crossed the line from the land of youth into the land of middle age. It will mean that I know now that my body is no longer in my service, but rather I will have to be in service to my body. And so the magic moment of seeing the specks of swimming sea monkeys just days old going against the weak current in their ocean view zoo isn't quite as satisfying as it was when I was younger and nearsighted. When I was younger and nearsighted, my obsession with sea monkeys began as most of my obsessions began. They began because shopping malls were in existence. And these centers catered to developing desire, highlighting lack, and providing the very objects over which one could pine. Although I had sources of money saving, I did not have the luxury of affording the instant gratification of seeing something I wanted and being able to buy it on the spot. When I bought something, it meant that I had wanted this something for quite a while and that I had saved for it for quite a while. I saved 15 cents a day from my lunch money. At 4 a.m. each morning before leaving for work, my father would lay $2 bills, one for me and one for my older sister, on the kitchen table. School lunch cost 85 cents, and we were allowed to keep the change to save for treats in the vending machine, or for paper at the school store, or for treats at bake sales, or to cover costs of special programs at the school, or for field trips. The point being that my parents taught us to save for things. My mother would reward us for plucking her gray hairs and underarm hairs, and for stepping on her back by giving us change. Yes. She would pay 5 cents for each hair. And I would count them. And so between lunches and caring for my mother's body, we could save. There was only one aisle in the mall toy store that held my interest longer than a few minutes. The science aisle contained the items that turned me into a consumer. I pined for sea monkeys, and I pined for the microscope set. I pined for the magic rocks, and I pined for the telescope. I wanted the star chart, the glow-in-the-dark decals. I wanted the ant farm, the rock polisher, the terrarium kits. I wanted to watch things live and grow, for the unseen to become seen. It was there, at the KB Toys in Ingram Park Mall in San Antonio, Texas, that I bought my first batch of sea monkeys with leftover lunch money. I had followed the instructions to a T. I had waited for 24 hours for the water purifier to cure the distilled water that my mother used for ironing. I stirred for the minute the package the sea monkey eggs said to stir very carefully, lest I crack or break any of the too tiny to see sea monkey eggs or injure any too tiny to see live baby sea monkeys. I held the Ocean View Zoo up to my father's desk lamp to see if I could see the newly hatched babies swimming, and I could. And it was delightful. And I stared for a long time, which, being nearsighted, I could comfortably do. The booklet said that the new babies would be no bigger than a sentence at the end of the period in the booklet, a booklet printed in what I am now sure is 6-point font. There were so many of them, a swarm of them, a cloud of pale dots with the tiniest of flippers making their way to unknown and new waters, however finite, artificial, and contained. And I'm going to skip a little bit. I talk about how I try to get other children to grow sea monkeys, and it just didn't work out. And then I talk about all the wonderful things that you could buy, and I saved money to buy like sea diamonds that would float up and various vitamins that would change them colors. And I talk about how they deceive children with their use of words. I have not told you, however, about being lonely. I have not told you about how being 10, 11, and 12 were the loneliest years for me, and these were the years when I raised pet sea monkeys. I have yet to tell you how I walked home alone each day after school while the other children were picked up by their mothers or walked together in groups because they were friends or lived in the same direction. No one walked with me. I lived on the outskirts of our neighborhood, so far out that some of the houses on my street split off from the school district I was in, and the children in those houses were picked up and dropped off from their faraway school on buses. No one walked with me to this fractured street, a street named Dream Valley. So I would walk alone, and on these walks I held my school books because I didn't have a backpack, and I would note the various flowers and flowering weeds, and sometimes I would pick a few to put in a water cup in my room, or I would try to dig up entire root systems of Mimosa pudica. Do you know that plant? You touch it and it closes. In hopes that it would take and keep growing on my windowsill, but nothing wild ever took. I haven't yet told you how having sea monkeys gave me something to look forward to, something at home that I could meet and greet and see real progress and change, all things that came into existence because of me and my having poured the eggs into the purified waters. My favorite time of day to lose myself in their curly Q rivets and somersaults. See, I too have a flair for dressing up their actions. Was late afternoon, when the setting sun would strike into my west-facing bedroom and light up the algae so that it was all abloom with the tiniest orbs of oxygen bubbles. The little clouds of algae would burst with pearls of air and take on an otherworldly and mystical green, and the sea monkeys, sensitive to light, would respond by rapidly darting and swimming faster, their sluggish bodies suddenly speeding up as if in fast forward. I always thought then that they appeared happy. That is, I took their frenzy as happiness. I spent summers watching them mate and have offspring. I had 2 males who were robust breeders with head whiskers larger than the others, and often they did lock their head whiskers together as if rival bucks and go to battle. For there was one female sea monkey that always appeared to be the partner in their mating. She didn't appear to be any larger or smaller than the other females, but she did have a more reddish hue about her, an orange, pink, and more bulbous egg sac. I watched her egg sac darken with beads of eggs over and over again. I watched her little babies grow into adolescent and then adult sea monkeys. Although I was a keen observer of my sea monkeys' lives, I tried as little as possible to intrude on or in any way affect the organic, although artificial way that they lived. So although I very much wanted the sea monkey pendant, a necklace that I could keep a few sea monkeys in and wear about my neck during the day and return them to their tank at night, I did not order the pendant. I did not order the sea monkey racetrack because that would require that I remove them from their tank and put them in the contraption, whatever that was. There were times, however, when their lives did depend on mine. There were times when their thoracopods snagged against a cottony ball of algae and got caught, a prisoner to its own food and air supply. It could stay that way for days, and the little sea monkey could only helplessly tug each day, and its strength would diminish bit by bit. And so I would take the sharp end of a bamboo skewer and gently try to pry the dear little brine shrimp out of its death trap. I knew that I could hurt it or even kill it, but I knew that if I didn't try at all, that it would die. So try I did, and I helped to free them safely each time. I did not know when I was young that to keep a tank going for so long was rare, that to keep the sea monkeys alive for even a few months was rare. One of the great tragedies of my young life was when our pet cat, named Cat, jumped on the windowsill in my bedroom and knocked down one of my tanks, tossing all the water and sea monkey fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, babies, and eggs into the red shag carpeting, which made finding the translucent bodies nearly impossible. I gathered 7 of the known 8 adults that inhabited that tank and transferred them to another. I searched for a long time but could not find the lost sea monkey of the tribe, something that I felt haunted by for a long time. For a long while, there was water, and then there was no water. Then there was a flash of red, a struggle, then night. I felt haunted by the lost sea monkey's life because it was I who brought this creature into existence, something that had not perhaps that it had not perhaps especially wanted. And it was through my inattention and inability to act quickly enough that caused the sea monkey to perish. I now have children of my own, and I wanted to share my sea monkey obsession with my daughter, who demanded that the sea monkeys appear as their cartoony selves the moment powder hit water. She did seem disappointed to see that there was nothing to be seen, a feeling that I let slide on account of her only being 3. As the weeks went by, I delighted in seeing this huge sea monkey tribe, over 18 adults, the largest I have ever raised. But quickly, within weeks of their maturing, they slowly died. Their bodies became sluggish, and their thoracopods barely lifted, barely bellowed. They lied on the bottom of the tank, hushing their breathing until they turned gray, then black, then died. I have not yet told you about once feeling a void so impossible that I could not rid it with any hobby or treats. It was an intense loneliness. I would make dinner, and there at the table, lives felt missing. I had a desire for a child, but for a long time I could not get pregnant. Female sea monkeys can get pregnant without mating, without the presence of males. Without any other sea monkeys, they can, in this way, have both live and egg births. But not me. No matter what we did, my husband and I could not have a baby. With my own body, it did not happen as easily as giving life to sea monkeys. And I carried this empty egg sac with me for so long until I was told that now my chances were less than 5%, and now my chances were less than 1%. And then one day I got a terrible eczema outbreak, and I knew. My current sea monkey has been alive a long time. I hatched him in January, and it is now a few days shy of September. But he is the lone survivor, the last of his tribe, and he has been alone longer now than he has been with others of his kind. I don't know if he remembers or knows that life is or can be different than just this private and desolate and lonely existence. Both scenarios make me sad. I do not believe that I will bring another tank of sea monkeys to life. For although I have delighted in seeing them hatch, come alive, swim, and thrive, I cannot any longer bear to see them die. And I'll just read 2 more very short essays. I live in the house that screams. Across the street was the house that screamed. That house did not always scream, but one day it began to scream. When James, who was in my 2nd grade class, moved in, the house began to scream. James's father drove the car that could barely make it down the street and then into the driveway, and that was when the house across the street began to scream. It began to scream when the father's car had made it to the driveway. James had a hole in the butt of his jeans, and the orange of his underwear showed through that hole. They lived in the house that screamed. They screamed, and we all knew they screamed because they were poor, poorer than the rest of us were. James was more poor because his family rented from Benji, who was a landlord who bought up houses to rent to the poor. Besides, James drank up every drop from his carton of chocolate milk during lunch at school, and every day he wore the same pair of jeans with the hole in the butt of them that let his underwear show through. He didn't speak to anyone, and his hair grew long over his eyes. One day after school, my mom and dad had not come home from work yet, and I had the new, sweet, high-C juice boxes. And because of this juice box, I am sure, other boys from school came into my yard to play. My sister and I, not knowing better, not knowing how much juice boxes cost, or that my mother, who had bought them, considered them a rare treat for after-school drinking when she could not be there, had gone inside and gotten juice boxes for all the boys who had come into our yard to play. There were boys from my class who, in school, didn't ever talk to me. If you blew into your straw, it would make the juice shoot from the box like a water gun. I alone knew this trick and ran around spraying the contents of my dear and expensive juice box at these boys who did not speak to me in school. They protested that their mothers would be mad, but I kept at it. I even kept at it with James, the boy who wore the same pair of jeans every day and who had, even though he never spoke to anyone in school, come outside and into my yard to play. And so, how could all us kids hide that certain kind of evidence? All the juice gone from the fridge, the jeans sticky and soaking wet. That night, when the rest of us were readying ourselves for baths or supper, there had been screaming from the house across the street, and I was certain that night I had been the one to cause it. I now live in the house that screams. My daughter, even though she is now 3, when she knows I'm readying myself to go to work, cries and screams. I have unkindly told her that if she does not stop, then I will throw something at her head, and I will take her favorite toys away, and I will go and stay away from her for a very long time. She has only been loving and asking for hugs and kisses and saying, pick me up and give me big hugs for a long time and hold me, and I will miss you, and I will cry, and please come sit with me on the couch for a little while. But I have told her to stop, that she's making me crazy. I have slammed a cabinet door. I have thrown things. I have to leave the house just now, just this instant, or I will be late for the meeting. And I need to mail the rent check for this apartment that costs more than I am earning. And just yesterday morning, our car stopped working, and I cannot keep all the Cheerios off the floor or all the crumbs from falling on the carpet that I had just yesterday vacuumed thoroughly, and I cannot keep anything organized or clean. And someone at work is constantly telling my boss that I am doing everything all wrong, and my hair is graying, and my mother is so far away, and so there's little to do now other than become the house that screams. I have been given for Mother's Day time to write. Even as my husband was gathering my son and daughter to head out the door, I was the house that screamed. My daughter, knowing that she would be away from me, said, Mommy, I will miss you, and I know, how about we all go? And I want to stay with you, and Mommy, I want you. And I, feeling that certain tremor swelling from somewhere, demanded that my husband just grab them and go, because I wanted the time so badly to be mine and to be alone. It is now, as a consequence, so quiet, I can hear the windows shriek on account of their frames being ill-fitting, the insistent screech that signals the spin cycle in the wash machine. And just one little tiny one more. This is one of my favorites. And this is for my little penny girl in the audience. This one's called Tether. I didn't realize until later, after the lights were out and the sheets were tucked around her, that when my daughter asked that I hold on tight to the balloons, that what she really wanted was for the party to not end. And she thought that if we held on to the balloons, that the party would not end. And she needed my help in this one sure party-saving trick. And that is why she had what we call a meltdown. Her mother failed to help her in this one act that was sure to keep us at the party forever. She had asked me, previous to the balloon time-stopping attempt, to give her the moon. Can't reach it, she said. I, too, could not reach it, knew I could not reach it, but showed her that I was trying, that I would if I could. And she has said the sentence as clear as a bell tonight, Mommy, let me have it. And it was stunning. The message, the sentence, the want, the clarity of that. And we have given her the balloon at the top of the balloon tower. It is a giant shimmering silver star balloon that, after we had dismounted it, was discovered to be full of the buoyant helium. Hold it tight, I tell her, so that it doesn't fly away, so that it doesn't go up and stay with all the other stars that are too far away. I try to placate her so that she will not cry the whole ride. Someday, Mommy will get you the moon. I realize now that that is what I do when I hold her at night. I am trying to keep us here. I am trying to keep her from floating away and staying where I cannot reach her. And between the darkness and the bad dreams, it is solely the hold that makes her trust the deep drowning of sleep. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about my kids.